about love. Every line is bound to maintain it. You got to knock the legs with an eye. Don't throw a stone, you don't know. It's what you say, it's what you do. Don't throw your stone.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Out on That Line podcast. I am Alex, joined, as always, by the big bad man himself, Geoff. Geoff, how's it going?
Oh, we're doing great. Excited about this one.
So, yeah, we're going to dive right into Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. If I'm not mistaken, we've obviously got this 2020 edition, and I think the last one came out in 2003.
Yeah.
I saw something that implied that there was one in 2012, but I get...
I think they just updated some.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, oh, well, we would have included this one on that. They didn't. I don't think they did a full rundown list, like a full do-over like they did with this one.
Because when I looked at I found a spreadsheet from someone who has even more time on his hands than me. But I was looking at the spreadsheet, and a lot of the albums didn't move, and that was what threw me. So I think you're right. It was like maybe something got inserted or shifted here in like a very negligible way. But this, between 2003 and 2020, was like an exhaustive overhaul. Mm-hmm. And I think also like an exhaustive overhaul where you saw the list move away from rock and roll and from like the boomer sensibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing I noticed, that they certainly left things off that I thought should have been on there. I think a notable, one that was missing that was on there first was that Trout Mask Replica, I think was the album that you had when you lived down here in Austin. And that's just one example, but there was a few things that, there were some real notable changes on here compared to 17 years ago when they released it the first time. And I think, there is some good analysis to be taken from that in kind of where the country is at, where music is at, and the things that, maybe we value out of music have changed since then. Certainly politics has become an all-encompassing, all-consuming part of life here in America these days. And I think this, updated list, it kind of reflects that.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, the makeup of who is asked to influence the list and their process for it. If I'm not mistaken, they ask like 300 people, and that can be anybody from artists themselves to music journalists to whomever, to, I think, log a certain amount of picks, and then they kind of aggregate everything and rank it from there. But yeah, it's definitely I would go ahead and say a seismic shift in terms of sensibilities. And I think that's probably a product of people who don't get invited back to participate, new blood, people who are, what criteria are they using? Because there's something like this. Is it the cultural impact it had? Is it its objective best musical qualities? I would argue that the new number one on this list is kind of a mix. I think it was politically the time for something like this to really get the shine and get reevaluated and to move up. And I think it's deserving of a number one spot. I know a lot of people were like, what the fuck? But I think it's perfectly deserving of it. And I think it was, I don't want to say politically motivated, because that sounds like some kind of weird, like affirmative action type thing. What I mean is, I think the moment, again, forces that introspection. And once you really look at it, you go, if there's a very strong case to be made, again, on a list that doesn't reflect universal taste, but is meant to give a sample size. I think it was politically the moment for it. And certainly in terms of what it did for the music industry and the quality of the work, all elevates it and all qualifies it. So obviously any random person could have any number of issues with anything on this list. Its inclusion, its lack of inclusion, where something is placed on the list. I mean, 'cause I certainly approached this from things that were surprising from a music fan perspective, but also some where my personal taste did bleed through, and you'll definitely know because I'll make it very clear. So,
And we can start right out with that if you like, with kind of the biggest movers. And the new number one album is Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Now, this one wasn't a huge mover. I think it was number 5 on the previous list. So it's not number 6. So it's not as if this one was like out of nowhere, the number one album. I think just culturally, the album that was number 1 previously, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles, that one culturally does not have a lot of relevance now. Musically and the influence it's had, sure. But in this day and age, there's a lot more that can be drawn out of and that you can get out of that What's Going On album than you can get out of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I think it was a worthy album to choose for that. I would have probably never picked that one myself. I think Bruce Springsteen would have made up the top 5 albums of all time for me if I had my druthers and could make my own list on this one. But again, that's where the kind of like, it's not a hard and fast absolute definition of the best albums of all time. It's the opinion of the best albums of all time, and that takes into account the cultural impact, the political impact, the how it affects an individual person, and I think, and also just the musical talent. You can say everything you want about how politically relevant What's Going On is today, but you can also just say that Marvin Gaye was one of the greatest singers of all time as well. So, even just on that fact, it's justified for this being ranked as number 1 on the greatest albums ever.
I completely agree with all of that. It's justified in terms of Marvin Gaye's talent, his cultural relevance, the moment of today. All of those things definitely hold true. And then controversially, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Sgt. Pepper's not that fucking good. It dropped from 1 to 24, and I don't think that's inappropriate.
No. And there's still other, I think Abbey Road is still in the top 10, so it's not as if the Beatles got bounced out of the top spots.
No.
Totally. I think people have realized that while they did influence popular music, culturally they didn't really influence a lot, at least not a lot that's lasted, because a lot of their songs were nonsense, and a lot of their songs were very simple songs about just like little love songs. In this day and age, if you're going to talk about the most influential and best albums of all time, you need a little bit more substance than they were offering in those albums. And I think in an album like Abbey Road, they offered a little more of that, and that's why it's still ranked pretty high on the list. I think it's still the top 10.
And I'm trying to find the actual new list right now. It's just like, Rolling Stone put it up in the absolute worst fucking way you could. It's like destroying my phone. It can't just like list them all. It's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, and it took, why they didn't offer like a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet themselves of the whole list to be able to do the comparisons, I don't understand. Because even on the computer, you still have to, you can't just scroll down in a list of 500. It's like they have it in the chunks of 50. So it's like if you don't find, you have to click in 500 to 451, and then it's 450 down to 401. And you got to do them in like these 50 album chunks, and it's just kind of annoying to sift through and navigate and find the comparisons between the two. So thankfully there's some enterprising people on the internet that you were able to find, the spreadsheets to juxtapose with one another.
Well, and the one thing I fucking want right now is just give me the 2020 version straight up and tell me what the rankings are. But the way the spreadsheet is organized, like, I appreciate the work that this person did, but it's not like the spreadsheet is not organized in any like sensible way. But I guess that doesn't matter. I wanted to go through what the top 10 was because pursuant to this whole Abbey Road plummeting and What's Going On moving up into the number 1 slot, it's a very diverse top 10. Prince, Purple Rain moved up from 76 to 8. That made your little friend Alex's heart smile because
oh yeah, me too.
I mean, I personally, as a Prince fan, probably would have put Sign of the Times in that spot, in the number 8, in terms of what was Prince's most mature, probably politically profound. So if we're elevating for the same reasons as What's Going On, I would have done Sign of the Times. But I mean, how can you fucking scoff at Purple Rain? There's no goddamn way. Like, it's the most popular Prince album. It's the one everybody associates with him. the look, the sound, all of it. So like no complaints there. It's that made my little heart smile to see him get up there.
I was that was a huge jump. What I didn't understand is in 2003, it's not as if we didn't know how good Prince was. To have ranked that album 76 was crazy to me. Was crazy that it made that big a jump. That it had to make that big a jump.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you have, and speaking as a David Bowie fan, you have an argument for him being in the top 100 or the top 50, but not the top 10. I don't know that I would put, as a David Bowie fan, any David Bowie album in the top 10. So I do understand that, again, the people that you might consider like, well, this is a landmark album. How could you not do this? It's rather influenced by personal taste. But something like Purple Rain is just so objectively good and such a game changer. It's like a landmark album of the 80s. Just the scope and the breadth and the fact that it was tied to a fucking movie and like that. I mean, really, when you break it down, the first instance of trying to market a movie and a tie-in soundtrack together was Saturday Night Fever. Because you have the Bee Gees working on that soundtrack, and that was when they realized, oh, you can have established artists do the soundtrack for a movie, and not only will people go see the movie, but they'll buy the album afterwards. So either the Bee Gees are sucking you in to go see the John Travolta dance movie, or the John Travolta dance movie is so dependent on the music. Imagine any other music for that movie.
I mean, that era of John Travolta is just something else.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, that Urban Cowboy. Oh.
Fucking A.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't, I don't know, would he even be really that relevant if he wasn't in those movies? I don't think he would be.
I mean, Pulp Fiction bought him a little goodwill in the 90s, and then he pissed that away too. What's he doing now?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, terrible movies. I mean, he made Face Off, and that movie has strangely great reviews.
Yeah, I don't.
And it is terrible movie. But we're getting off track here. So good. Prince made it to number 8. That's incredible. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, all the way up to number 7. They were number 26 in 2003. Again, these albums, like this album came out in 1977. By Fleetwood Mac. So it's this album had been out for 26 years. If I'm doing my math right in my head there, like it's not as if we weren't aware of how good that album was. Like, how did that what changed for them that Fleetwood Mac went from 26 all the way up to number 7? And I think it was that they misranked it previously. Like, this is the correct spot for that one because that album is unbelievable. It is so good. If you haven't listened to that one all the way through and, with the TikTok song and the Ocean Spray Cranberry Juice thing is taking the world by storm with Dreams. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people have listened to it now that hadn't before, but it's an incredible album. It is absolutely top to bottom perfect.
It's a fucking amazing album, and I think that in particular says a lot about, again, who is compiling these lists, like who is invited to compile these lists, and also like you're kind of watching the changing of the guard, because if you look at a lot of the artists who got bumped off the list, and I have them all chicken scrawled. I mean, there are some albums that went off the list, but some artists were completely bumped. And you can look at some people like Don Henley. I'm fucking glad he got off the list. He's a fucking scumbag. Fuck Don Henley.
Screw off. Just really the Eagles in general. Let me get that out there on behalf of Jeff Greenmore and myself. The Eagles fucking blow.
I'll co-sign that. Fuck the Eagles.
Yeah.
But the Mamas and the Papas off the list. Captain Beefheart off the list. Buffalo Springfield off the list. John Mayall off the list. Graham Parsons off the list. Barry White off the list. Certain stuff, Jane's Addiction off the list. MGMT off the list. Steve Miller Band, the Yardbirds, Meatloaf off the list. Like a lot of Alice Cooper. So you're watching, I think, a lot of the sensibilities change as a new generation comes up. And it's like now something like Fleetwood Mac, which maybe people would have been like, oh, that's like hippie, folksy bullshit. That doesn't rock, or that's not what we used to twist to down at the malt shop. Like now that you're kind of letting a new demographic crack this list, you're going to watch an older generation vanish and stuff kind of all gets pushed back a level. So I think that's why something like Prince, it's from the 80s, so it's like over 40 years old at this point. It's classic rock to a lot of people. Like to Billie Eilish, that's classic rock, which is fucking crazy to think about.
Yeah, and it's just, I think there's so much of that. I mean, there in the original list, I mean, the Beatles had 3 albums in the top 10, and I think they went down to 1. You know, and I think it's because in the artists you were mentioning, you know, Buffalo Springfield, Graham Parsons, you know, Meatloaf, all these artists, like Meatloaf is probably the most recent one of any of those, you know, as far as when he was relevant. You know, Bat Out of Hell in the late 70s, I think. I forget what year that came out. I think it was like, 77 or something like that. But, you know, after Graham Parsons and that. So it's like you take that whole generation. And while I am upset that that Bat Out of Hell did not make the list, either one of the 2, you know, first albums in that series, but, you know, I certainly understand why it happened. You know, I don't have to like it, and I don't, but I certainly understand why that happened. But someone like Graham Parsons, like, you know, it's just not culturally relevant now. You know, it was then. You know, it certainly was important then, but like you're saying, there's a whole new generation that's putting these things out there, and it's not as if they're not giving respect to the bands from that time that deserve it, but in the 17 years since they released this list for the first time, there's a lot of incredible, important music that's been made, and it deserves to have its place, you know, and if some things have to get bumped off the 500 greatest albums, so be it. That's what has to happen.
And I will say, like you, grew up on Meatloaf, love Meatloaf, but if he had to get bumped so Frank Ocean could get on twice, I'll take that, because Frank Ocean, I mean, Blonde is a fucking killer fucking album. Mm-hmm. And it 100% deserves inclusion on the list. And he's one of the new batch of artists who made the list for the first time. Mm-hmm. And So I all things must, what did they say in fucking The Last Jedi? Kill the past, let old things die if you must, or whatever the fuck.
Oh, so, yeah. Oh, yeah. I try to forget some of the lines in those movies, but
much maligned.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching them, but yeah, if you're looking for great storylines and the perfect ending to the Star Wars, the Skywalker saga, those movies ain't it.
Look elsewhere.
Certainly entertaining. Not going to be a waste of your time, but you know, they don't get there for me. But you know, some artists have to leave, because imagine this list if you didn't put Beyonce on it. Mm-hmm. You know, imagine this list if you didn't put Kanye on it. As much as he's a dickhead now, you know, think of those albums that he's come out with, and to say that those didn't belong on the 500 greatest albums of all time, like there were going to be albums that came out in these past 17 years that were better and more culturally relevant than, you know, the albums that got bumped off of here. And I mean, you can argue with that, and I'm not going to really, you know, say that you're wrong about those albums deserving to be on there, but at this moment in time, I certainly understand why they're not.
And like, I don't care for Taylor Swift, but I 100% back her inclusion multiple times on this list, because she's culturally relevant. And if you say, well, the sticking point is the greatest albums of all time, I don't personally think they're great. It's like, you didn't come up with that stuff. So
the sales were great.
Yeah, the sales were off the fucking charts. Yeah. And again, I'm just going to keep using her. If Billie Eilish was asked to contribute to the fucking list, that's what she's going to have reference for. Not, you know, Jumpin' Jake and the hula hoops. Like,
yeah,
no, fucking A. Some stuff passes into antiquity. And the thing is, it will never be forgotten. The fact that you're upset that it didn't make the list means you should go listen to that album and remember why you love it. Remember why you love that artist. You're keeping them alive. You don't need a Rolling Stone list to validate your taste or to, like, immortalize. These things don't stop existing. It's not Schrodinger's fucking 500 greatest albums of all time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's not a zero sum game here. You know, it's not like those albums stop existing because they're not on this list anymore, or because other ones were included. You know, I think it's just, you have to take some of them with a grain of salt. Like, there's some stuff that I just don't believe should have been ranked where it was. You know, like, say specifically Joni Mitchell went from 30 all the way to 3 with the album Blue. And, you know, you can feel how you want about Joni Mitchell, but if we're going to exclude Graham Parsons and we're going to exclude, you know, Buffalo Springfield and Meatloaf and these artists from that era, you know, why is why is Joni Mitchell getting the number 3 spot if all those other artists are just totally taken out altogether? Why did she move up 27 places? I certainly am not questioning the fact that she belongs on the top 500.
Sure.
But, some of the placements to me, didn't make a lot of sense. And I think they were trying to say something with the placements of some of them. And I think that Joni Mitchell Blue album was one of them because, your number 1 album, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, there for obvious reasons. It was number 6 on the previous list. So not a surprise that one would move up. The Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, number 2. And I think that was number 2 in 2003 as well. I think that was one of the few that didn't move at all, that stayed right where it was.
There were 2 that didn't move at all. Pet Sounds remained at number 2. Can you guess the other one?
I can't. I looked for it. I couldn't figure it out.
Oh, okay. Well, staying at 62 was Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses.
Okay. Hell of an album. Great album. Love that album.
Hanging in there.
Yeah, love that album. And I think 62 is about right. I mean, it definitely kicked off a whole new genre of music, but as far as like the cultural impact that these other albums had, I don't think Appetite for Destruction really changed anybody's life. I think some of these albums probably did.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys deserves to be there because that's a cultural moment in time. Like that sound, like the Beach Boys are timeless, and you can say whatever you want about, the music being a little antiquated and everything, but as like the talent that they had, the harmonies that they hit, there's very, very few bands that have ever been able to do that. That some of their contemporaries that you've heard of might be like Boyz II Men, as far as people that had like the talent to do that. And you think about how tough it is to hit those notes and everything. And if you've played in a band or done any sort of singing, you know how hard it is to hit a note in the first place. And then to have to worry about what 3 other people are singing. And I think it was they're basically like a quartet, right? With the melodies and harmonies they were putting together.
The Beach Boys?
Yeah.
No, there's 5 of them.
5. Okay. So then you have to worry about what 4 other people are doing, and you have to fit in. Like that takes a lot. And the fact that they were able to do that at that time period and record it in the way that they did was incredible. So that album deserves to be there.
Brian Wilson is a fucking pioneer, and Pet Sounds was pioneering sound in terms of production, in terms of the sheer scope of what he was able to accomplish. I think Brian Wilson, if I'm not mistaken, was 25 when he wrote Pet Sounds. I mean,
that's
fuck.
Crazy.
And you can say like the music's a little antiquated, but I wouldn't even go that far. Like I don't think it necessarily sounds old. I mean, you could tell me fucking, if you didn't know better, the Pepsi Challenge, Bon Iver writes a song like that. I'm not saying Bon Iver's that good, but you could see a sound similar to what they were doing done today, but no one's doing it because no one has the compositional genius of Brian Wilson. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's just on another level, tortured fucking guy, but living a happy life now that he's older. But what it took to get him to that point was crazy. But that for me almost would be the strongest rival to move up to 1. If it wasn't What's Going On, I think the only other argument is Pet Sounds goes to 1.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen would be mine, but that's total personal bias. And for the reasons that you're saying, I would have not argued about Pet Sounds being number 1. And we can go on Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run because I do have a bone to pick. It dropped 3 spots. It went from 18 to 21.
Uh-oh.
Unacceptable. You listen to that album and tell me that album isn't any better than Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks. And I might get some hell for that, but it's like, as far as what you want to sit down and listen to and what really gets you going, like Born to Run does it. I mean, it's just the fact that it dropped 3 spots is crazy to me. Crazy.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and quite frankly, I am legitimately, like, I know it's a bit, but I am legitimately surprised that Springsteen didn't crack the top 10. I honestly would have put Born to Run at 10. It is just like pure Americana. And I realize the argument can be made for Bob Dylan as well, and I realize it's not an American list necessarily, but I don't know, man. Maybe I've got a little Springsteen bias in me too after all these years of friendship, but I would have put that at least 10.
Yeah. I mean, and he's on, he hits several times on here, but I think Greetings from Asbury Park dropped off. I think it was on the original list and is not now. I think Wild the Innocent, E Street Shuffle actually moved up on this one compared to the last one. And he definitely had some spots on here, so it's not like Bruce got snubbed, but
he lost 3 of them. It was Tunnel of Love, The River, and The Rising. Those all dropped off.
Yeah. Those, well, and I could see that. I mean, none of those you could say are his strongest effort. I mean, all albums that I liked, but The Rising, I don't know why that one was on there to start with. I think The Rising was because of 9/11, and the list came out in 2003, so it had like that cultural relevance there. But after that, it kind of lost its steam. I find it hard to believe that he didn't. That Born to Run wasn't higher, and that's definitely all personal bias. Like I'll own that, but man, that pissed me off.
I mean, I know how you feel because Costello, Imperial Bedroom, and Armed Forces both got punted, and My Aim Is True, and what other one is on there? My Aim Is True, and This Year's Model both moved down. Yeah. So Costello quickly losing favor with the next generation. That makes me sad.
Yeah, and I will be honest, I have listened to a little bit of Costello. I have listened because of New Girl and Winnie the Bish and Allie, and he does the Allison. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll check that song out. Like,
Allie's not short for Allison, right?
Yeah,
that's such a great moment.
Yeah, it's such a great. I mean, Winnie the Bish, he's my guy.
He's so good.
He's the guy. He's
CC Winnie the Bish. It's your boy.
Classics. Winston CC mess around. Yeah, just a great dynamic with that gentleman. But yeah, so I've checked that one out, and it's like there are some songs that I think do deserve by Costello that I think do deserve to stay culturally relevant, but I think he was singing about he was very also, had a lot of pop culture references in his songs. Mm-hmm. So I think as they age, those things aren't relevant anymore. So I think they get kind of left by the wayside, where it's, he was very good at talking about very specific things, as opposed to like Springsteen, who talks about these broad ideas by, having specific situations. I think Elvis Costello was talking very specific storylines with very specific things.
Well, like the song Oliver's Army is specifically a criticism of like British parliamentary politics. The song Pills and Soap off of Punch the Clock, it's the last song of Punch the Clock, is about the Thatcher administration. So it's all, like you said, very specific stuff.
Yeah, and I think the downfall that I've seen with what I've listened to is he doesn't generalize enough. So it's hard for songs like that to stay culturally relevant when they're about such a specific thing. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, he's sold tons of records, so he's obviously done fine for himself. But it's like, that's, I think, why some of them have fallen off. And I think that's what happened with a lot of these artists, is that they were talking about very specific things that were relevant then that aren't now. And I think we've had to move those out so that we could bring in the albums that are relevant to today's day and age.
But I will say, too, pursuant to Bruce Springsteen not cracking the top 10, probably Born to Run should have been 10. Fucking Bob Dylan, don't get me wrong. I appreciate his place in the canon. There's a lot of Bob Dylan that I really enjoy, and a lot of it comes out of my friendship with friend of the pod Tyler. But the rampant Bob Dylan fetishism bugs me. Mm-hmm. It bugged me a lot when I was young, and then I started listening to Bob Dylan, and it bothered me less. But then he released the 16-minute fucking piece of shit. I don't remember. Yeah, fuck that. And everyone was like, oh my God, it's so wonderful. And it's because Bob Dylan did it. Yeah. So this fucking fetishism for Bob Dylan bothers me quite a bit. When he earns it, he earns it. When he just shows up, you don't have to give him a fucking cookie. You should be able to look him in the face and go, you wrote a bad song, Bobby.
Yeah. And I mean, he's got Highway 61 Revisited is 18. Blood on the Tracks is number 9, I think. And I think so he's 10, got 2 in the top 20. And it's just not, I don't know. It just doesn't jive with me.
And yeah, no, I completely agree. And at this point too, we're talking about the biggest changes. An interesting one for me, because I kept saying, oh, Bob Dylan's 10, Bob Dylan's 10. Actually 10 in a 304 net gain from 314 to space 10 was The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
Oh, yeah.
That's fucking great.
Yeah, I've been beating this drum for a long time. That album is unbelievable.
You are not just talking out of your ass. It is fucking great.
Yeah, and I mean, I think her big issue was because she was so talented. She got pulled in so many directions that it was impossible to stay sane in that sort of situation. So she just kind of wrote off being in the public eye. She was like, that's not for me.
Well, and look at like Erykah Badu finally made the fucking list this time around. Like black women getting their due with this. This is why it's good to update this, because it was very easy to give something to Aretha Franklin because people were like, oh, it's very inoffensive and she's singing about like love your man. But people like Erykah Badu and Lauryn Hill want to get into some real powerful, relevant shit.
Yep. And Beyonce.
So,
can't
and
leave her out
Beyonce.
either. Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
Lemonade,
just like,
Lemonade, what, number 30, 32? I mean, and that's, my fiance, Marla, is a huge Beyonce fan. So, I've heard plenty of Beyonce now to know that I think 32 might be a little low. Obviously you can't put every album in the top 10, but it's just with what she is doing with her platform right now and the risks that she's willing to take, both, aesthetically, like fashion wise and everything like that, as well as the messages she's willing to send, is just incredible. And she's very much, I think, a great example for the entire country to follow of stick to yourself, do the things that you love, and, hopefully you find some success in that, but, mostly be true to yourself, do the things that you find value in.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for reference, because we keep talking about the top 10, I do have it in front of us, so I'll just present it. In ascending order: number 10, Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Number 9, Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks. Number 8, Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain. Number 7, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Here's one I also love. Number 6, Nirvana, Nevermind. That was a big one for me. Big Nirvana guy. Number 5, The Beatles, Abbey Road. Makes sense. Number 4, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. Again, maybe not the album I would have picked, but I would have put Stevie in that slot. I think I would have put Inner Visions there, but that's just me.
Yeah, he's just incredible.
He's so fucking good. I mean, that run of albums, Talking Book, Inner Visions, Music of My Mind, just like bam, 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 bam. Songs in the Key of Life followed after that.
Yeah.
I mean,
He was a hit machine.
It's not even a hat trick if it's 4. I don't even know what you call that. A thong trick? I don't know. But 3, Joni Mitchell, Blue. 2, The Beach Boys, Pet Sounds. And then number 1, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On.
Yeah, and I think Nirvana made a pretty good jump there. What did they jump up? They were like 16 or something on the previous list. So they jumped up 10.
Find the spreadsheet here. Nirvana, where are you?
They were
17. 17, yeah.
Yeah, so they jumped up 11. So they were in the top 20 anyway, and they jumped up 11 more spots. And that, I think that's just because, I think they're focused with this list, with 2020's list. I think it was more of a focus on the cultural impact that the album had and maybe continues to have, because Nirvana definitely still influences a lot of the bands today.
Yo, fuck yeah. I think everyone's kind of chasing that aesthetically, sonically. Everybody it's set a gold standard.
Yeah. I mean, few have ever gotten close to, being the same kind of relevant that Nirvana is, or was, but they definitely, you hear that influence in a lot of things, whether it was any good or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then to your whole point about cultural relevance influencing the list, I have here my 3 most surprising adds to the list. One of them was a pleasant surprise. One of them is thumbs in the middle, and one of them is like a vehement hatred.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. How did you structure yours?
Mine, I just picked the ones that I was like, I'm glad this made it, when I was kind of looking at the ones that I was surprised to be added. So when I mentioned Beyonce Lemonade, I think it was very important that she was included, just because how do you talk about music in the last, decade and a half or 2 decades without mentioning Beyonce?
Yeah.
Like you
I don't
can't
think
you
you can.
can't do it, and you shouldn't do it. It's very disingenuous not to do it. Amy Winehouse, Back to Black, coming in at number 33. That's one I don't know if I would have ranked it that high, but absolutely with she passed away. What year was it? Like 2009 or 10?
2011, I think.
2011. Yeah,
I
so
was
it's
still in college.
a long time ago at this point, but still we still talk about her because of how otherworldly her talent was. Just the way that she blended so many genres of music while her life was an absolute chaos, and she was able to produce this work. And then our girl Casey Musgraves, Golden Hour, coming in at 270. Yeah, this is one that I thought should have been ranked so much higher than 270. And I think if they do this list, another 17 years from now, this one's probably one that's going to get ranked a lot higher.
I think so. More and more people that you talk to are discovering the album and really liking it. Notwithstanding the girl that I met on Tinder who had Casey Musgrave lyrics in her profile, and I was like trying to be all smooth. I was like, oh, bonus points for the Casey Musgrave. And she goes, yeah, I really like her, except for her new album because it sucks, and she was on psychedelics when she did it, and that's not cool. It's like, oh, fuck. Oops.
Yeah, probably wouldn't worked out with me either.
Click.
Yeah. See you later, babe.
It's like I literally just got done recording a podcast singing the praises of this song.
Yeah, so those are the three that I thought was... Oh, I also wrote down the Arctic Monkeys AM album coming in at 346. Have listened to a lot of them because, again, my fiance is a big Arctic Monkeys fan. So, and I always knew who they were, but never really would go out of my way to listen to them. And I do now, because it's just, they're very, very good, and they get real heavy sometimes. And I like that a lot. So when I picked these ones, I was just like, those were the ones that I was happy to see made it, that were the new additions. So I'd like to hear yours, because I think yours are going to be a little more interesting as far as why you put them on there.
All right, we'll start from the middle and then we'll jump around. So Billie Eilish, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, whatever the fucking album's called. When we all fall asleep, where do we go? Or whatever it's called. Yeah,
you got the second one. Yeah.
Okay. That came on the list at 397. I'm on the record as being pretty lukewarm on Billie Eilish. Mm-hmm. Again, our argument of it's about what's relevant. I do get that. It does feel, you were saying it would be disingenuous to leave Beyonce off. Part of me thinks it's a little disingenuous to include Billie Eilish this early in her career, this close to the album coming out. And I guess it's different. I'm not a Zoomer. I'm not the TikTok generation. And I know that's really where her base is. But how many of those people did you invite to contribute to this list? So it makes me think that maybe it was older people reaching to try to look cool. Mm-hmm. But I just personally don't get Billie Eilish. I nothing against her as a person, but it's not for me. So I just disagree with it from a personal preference standpoint. But it's not like, fuck you, Billie Eilish, you fucking little bitch. Like, she's 17.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I wouldn't have, because I've listened to that album because it's just, it's a big album. So it's like, well, let me see what everybody's freaking out about. And certainly I like, Bad Guy is a great song. That beat in the whatever, the bridge or whatever after the chorus is really good. But it's just, yeah, I agree with you where it's like, it feels like that one was put on there just because they felt like they had to. And it wasn't necessarily like, I don't know if that album is going to have the longevity that inclusion on this list would indicate that it should.
I completely agree with you. And I'm sorry. I don't think it will. I think she will grow creatively because she can sing. I think she'll grow creatively. She'll try different things. She'll lose a big portion of that audience, but she'll be better off for it. And I think this will be seen as one of the early outings. And no, I don't think it has the staying power that you would assume by putting it on this list. I wish her the best of luck in the wars to come.
Yeah.
But it gets
and she could very well, hopefully she does come out with an album. At some point that warrants, inclusion much higher on the list. It's not as if we're wishing bad things upon her by saying that maybe that album didn't belong on the list as opposed to some others that got left off. But it's, hopefully she does at some point come out with an album that totally makes us look like fools,
Yeah. I would love that. I have nothing against her other than, what did Tim Dillon say? She looks like an MK Ultra victim. Like the whole
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh God. He's like, she looks like someone that's been kept in a cage for 10 years. Like the low
and
energy.
Just to let everybody know, when we say MK Ultra, we're not some QAnon weirdos.
No,
like, MK Ultra was a thing. It happened. Look it up.
COINTELPRO, actual thing. Like, we're not doing the whole like lizard people, Finland is not real, the earth is flat thing. It's also a joke from a guy that jokes about that shit. So
yeah.
I don't get the whole low energy, act like you don't give a shit. It's like this wrestler, Orange Cassidy. His whole gimmick is like he wrestles with his hands in his pockets.
See, we're going on a little tangent here, but I watched one of the, what promotion is he in?
AEW.
So I watched one of the pay-per-views that they did probably like a year ago, maybe. And no, it was at the beginning of this year, and I forget who he was wrestling, but it's the first time I'd ever seen him do anything. And I thought it was the most inventive, funny thing, but I could see how that wouldn't, if that's all it is, that would get old.
That's all
a
I've
novelty
seen from him. So I'm just like, I don't quite get it, but whatever, to each their own.
It was a very cool way, if that's how he's going to always wrestle, if that's like his entire character, I can see how that just would get played out. But it was just like that one match I saw was just really goddamn funny how he did it. Just his hands in his pockets, I'd never seen that before.
But also, I hate wrestling now, so he can fuck it up all he wants, and I support him. So that's actually not that big a deal. I retract the statement. But anyway, this is an interesting one. Tell me if you've ever heard of Laura Nyro, Eli and the 13th Confession.
Nope.
That album came out in 1967.
Yeah.
It's only 463 on the list, but it wasn't on it before. Yep. I've only heard one song from it. It's called Eli's Comin'. It is fucking weird. I'll send it to you when it's done. Interesting song, but I literally found it like through the Spotify algorithm just stumbling around. I had no idea other people knew about it, let alone that it would get grandfathered into this list in 2020.
Yeah.
Really fucking weird.
Yeah, I think that's one that we would have to like look into the lyrics of the album and figure out why. Maybe sonically they were doing something that was really groundbreaking that we didn't realize was groundbreaking till much later.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think the same way that the shine of the Beatles has kind of worn off, over the years, I think the same thing can happen where maybe we didn't realize the impact something had when it came out. And now we're giving its just, its due. But this one, I don't know. I literally never heard of it. Like everything else on this list, I'd at least heard of, like maybe tangentially of, folks that were involved in the album. Maybe I hadn't heard the specific songs. But it's just always strange to me when something like that gets included. I'd like to find out why. Maybe it totally deserves to be there, but why wasn't it on the list in 2003 if it deserved to be on it now?
I mean, yeah. And again, is it like a new generation discovering this because it's weird? And again, the only song I've heard is Eli's Comin', and it's a weird fucking song, and not even like Trout Mask Replica weird, like inaccessible. I remember playing it for Tyler and Tanner, and they were like, this song fucks. So it's a good song. But I thought it was just like a piece of music esoterica. But like, I don't know, maybe if I walk up to my dad tomorrow and I'm like, Laura Nyro, he'll be like, oh yeah. But I doubt it.
Doubt it.
If it ain't Jackson Brown, he doesn't know.
I bet your dad loves the Eagles too, doesn't he?
2 copies of Hotel California on vinyl on the record shelf, so I think it's safe to assume yes.
Gross.
I took the one that was in the plastic in case it was worth something, but I'm never gonna fucking.
How many of those they pressed?
Zillions. Well, I don't know. It's old as fuck, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm telling you, zillions. Like that's, I bet you my dad has one of those, probably 2 of them. I mean, that's one of those albums that like folks that collected vinyl from back in the day, like that's one of those ones that everybody's got.
Well, ask him if he wants a third because I don't want that evil.
It's so
fuck
bad.
The Eagles.
The funny thing is, like, Hotel California, I like that song a lot. I think that's one of the best classic rock songs ever. but I hate everything else they've ever done. Like, it comes on, it's like U2. It's like I'd rather stick ice picks in my eardrums than listen to it.
Oh, it's just unlistenable garbage.
Yeah.
It's what I mean. Steely Dan had a friendly rivalry with them that was played up in the web series Yacht Rock, and the characters are like, at least our music doesn't sound like white noise. And Steely Dan has a lyric about like an arguing couple, turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. Like, let's turn on some fucking white noise so they can't hear us.
Oh,
like,
man, maybe enemy of my enemy is my friend. Maybe I'll have to start listening to the Dan.
I know Marla's big into the Dan.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like walls are getting broken down. I don't even know who I am anymore.
I like this. This makes me feel good.
All right, let's get to your third one that you were going to mention.
Yeah, this is the one that blisters my ass at 376. Goddamn motherfucking Neutral Milk Hotel in the Aeroplane Over the Sea. Gag me with a fucking spoon. Who fucking likes this album? Hipster douchebags.
Did some little indie Philly break your heart?
Several. I lived in Brooklyn, you know. It happened more than once.
Yeah, fuck that band.
I don't have much more to say other than fuck Neutral Milk Hotel. I'm glad it's the only album they ever released, and fucking the Airplane Over the Sea. It sucks. Every passing year, I hate it more. There was a point where I liked it a little bit, and I know Tanner doesn't like it, and Anna does. And he's like, oh, I'm trying to like listen to it for her, and I'm like, oh, I'll give it a shot, man. It's all right. And every year that passes, I'm like, why did I tell him that? This is fucking dog shit.
Yeah, you owe him an apology.
Apparently.
Right to say it.
Tanner, I'm sorry.
Yes, good. Thank you. So now I think we can get to some of our snubs. Some of the albums that we felt like should have been on there but weren't. And these I feel like are going to be very personal, at least for me. The first one I'm going to start out with is The Killer's Hot Fuss.
Was it on there before?
No, it came out after it didn't get on the list.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Cannot understand why. I mean, Killers today are still one of the more popular bands around. And honestly, Hot Fuss was one of the best debut albums ever. Like, the fact that one didn't make the list at all is just crazy to me. I don't understand. Sturgill Simpson didn't crack the list at all. The specific album Sailor's Guide to Earth, I think, was the one that should have done it for him.
Yeah.
The fact that wasn't on there. Those are the two that I think, as far as like definitely personally for me, were two that I thought should have made it. But, I think just in general, I think I'd find a lot of agreement with people that, those should have been on there. The ones that I think for me that should have really gotten on there, Coheed and Cambria's In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. That's the album that has A Favor House Atlantic, Blood Red Summer. Just one of the most groundbreaking, interesting albums I've ever heard. Completely changed the way that I listen to music and what I look for in music. I mean, that album to me is one of the most important in my life. Searching for a Former Clarity by Against Me. We talked about it on the episode that we did with Laura Jane Grace's Stay Alive. Just as far as the feelings in that album, the music in that album, it was Against Me at their very, very best. And it just, to me, again, one of those absolutely life-changing albums that, if you want to talk about like the impact that an album might have on people, and that's your reason for including them on this list, like to have those two not on there, maybe people just didn't know about them, but, we're talking about 500 albums and like to not even have a spot for one of those. And then as well as Purgatory by Tyler Childers, as far as like new country and things like that, the fact that Sturgill and Tyler Childers were both kept off the list is just wild to me.
Country kind of got boxed out on this one. Eric Church and Casey Musgraves, and I guess you have a pseudo argument for Taylor Swift. They all got on, but as a whole, country kind of got boxed out. Things dropped off the list or didn't come on.
Yeah, and you can say whatever you want about like today's country. Obviously, Luke Bryan's never going to belong on this list. You know what I mean?
Fuck no.
No matter how many records he sells, he's never said anything of substance in his goddamn life, I don't think. But to exclude like Sturgill Simpson, who is not only just, you could say what you want about Tyler Childers, him being kind of a very niche specific artist that not a lot of people know about. I'll honor that argument. But when Sturgill Simpson is such a basic, like a tastemaker in an entire genre of music and one of the most popular genres in the country, and not to have any one of his albums on there is wild to me.
I mean, Sailor's Guide to Earth was a big album too.
Yeah.
Like I remember, not that this necessarily means anything, but I remember Andy Richter fucking tweeting about it.
Yeah.
So like it made its way out there. People listened to it. It was a hot property. I do not get that one. I'm with you.
And he had
that.
one of the greatest Grammy performances ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he did All Around You with the orchestra there. I mean, it was just unbelievable that he just got left off. I mean, it really doesn't make sense to me how he got left off. Totally. The other ones, I'll listen to your arguments, but how he got left off, I don't understand.
No, I'll co-sign that. That's fucked. That's fucking weird.
Yeah.
The more you talk about it, the more I'm like, that's a pretty stark omission.
Yeah, and I mean, any one of them really. You could, I guess, High Top Mountain was a real straight up country album.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe that one didn't belong, but Meta Modern Sounds in country music was groundbreaking. Like nobody had done that before. Sailor's Guide to Earth, like nobody had done that before, where he basically took like sea shanty music, made it into like funky country, and made a whole like concept album about telling his son, like, this is how you act in the world, like don't fuck up. Just what an idea. And then, Sound and Fury that he just came out with last year is an incredible album as well. So you got really like 3 strong choices for Sturgill, and none of them made it on there.
I mean, yeah, and again, out of all of them, the strongest argument is Sailor's Guide to Earth. It just had such massive crossover appeal. It's so fucking good. It's suspicious that didn't even get in. The bottom, I would put it fairly high. I mean, if you're going to say Casey Musgraves hit the 200s, I would comfortably put Sailor's Guide to Earth in the 100s.
Yeah.
To be fucking fair. But the fact that it didn't even crack the list, that's suspect to me. I would agree.
And I mean, they had Arcade Fire on there.
Yeah.
Like as number 500. It's like you can't decide that Sturgill is better than Arcade Fire. Like, what are you actually listening to?
Yeah, it's not even a good Arcade Fire album. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I took a completely different approach to this. I went with things that were on the list before that got knocked off.
Okay.
And we've already talked about Meatloaf got booted. And again, that's a personal thing. But at the same time, no one was doing what he was doing either. That big Wagnerian operatic rock, the voice that he had, the writing of Jim Steinman. I think that's like worth some cultural preservation. So to treat him like a one-off novelty that you can just boot. I take back what I said. If Meatloaf had to die for Frank Ocean to live, Frank Ocean got 2 albums on there. I think you could have put Blonde on and kept Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Not that
I mean, there's so many
directly
that you
tied,
could
but-
say. I mean, the Beatles probably have like 8 albums on there. You could take any one of those off and I'd be fine with it. I mean, just, to leave Meatloaf off and then like, so one, Bat Outta Hell, but then Bat Outta Hell 2 is like comeback album, with one of the biggest singles of all time on there. And that doesn't get included is just ridiculous.
And it was what, 92 that came out?
Yeah, it was 92 or 93. I mean, it was well after the first one.
So it's not, I mean, if you wanted to swap that out and go, 2 supplanted 1, okay, I'm fine with that. But to like remove him entirely, that's fucked.
Yeah.
He's just so unique, and I get it. No one listens to him, and a lot of the people that do hate him. Shout out to Matt Reno. Sorry, buddy. But
Fuck Matt Reno.
Fucking prick. At least his wife has good taste in music, not necessarily men. But
see, she's a big Meatloaf fan. Yeah.
We torture the fuck out of the last couple times I've been out there. She'll just look, and I'll know exactly what's about to happen, and just click, on it goes.
Yeah,
Top to bottom.
I think her big one was Good Girls, or what's it? Why can't I think of the name? Why can't I think of it? I'm totally blanking.
Which one? Good Girls Go to Heaven?
Yes, Good Girls Go to Heaven, Bad Girls Go Everywhere. That was her.
Yeah.
That was her jam.
Hot song.
Yeah,
Hot fucking property.
Hot song.
The other one we already also talked about, Trout Mask Replica. I understand, because I don't know that you would call it a great album. I would call it a great experiment. It was like the whole story behind it. Captain Beefheart was this like really mercurial artistic guy, and the Magic Band was his band, and he basically made them live in a house for like 6 months, eating handfuls of soybeans and like doing a bunch of drugs. And it was a field recording. He recorded the whole album in different rooms of the house. So things are not like quite synced up. Like he's a little behind the beat singing while the guitar's going. And you hear it, and it sounds like 9 songs on top of each other, especially the first song on the album, Frownland. And he does not have a pleasant voice. He got one of these kind of voices. Like,
yeah,
it is not pleasant
like
to
a
listen
Dr.
to.
John.
Yeah, like a Dr.
Yeah.
John, Tom Waits kind of that kind of thing. But the trick that I realized, the first time you listen to it, it's fucking garbage. The second time you listen to it is like it's like doing the insanity workout. It's like you did it to say you did it. The third time you listen, you realize if you follow one piece of the song, you can follow the vocals, which is usually where I go, or the guitar, or whatever. If you follow one thing, everything else falls into place around it. That's the trick.
Yeah.
And it's just like weird, experimental. It's something completely different. So it's got a place in the pantheon for that. But in terms of a great album, it's a curiosity for music snobs. It's important to people who care about the development of music. But I don't think most people sit around listening to it for pleasure. Mm-hmm. I mean, I played it for the other guys once, and they were like, "Can we please put David Bowie Station to Station back on?" We liked that. This does not make sense.
Yeah, I mean, and me being like a big time like Coheed guy, like I'm absolutely down with getting weird. You know, the weirder the better for me when it comes to music, and still with Sturgill as well. Like the more out there you want to get, the more you want to push those boundaries. Like I'm in. So someone like Captain Beefheart, I think absolutely deserves a spot on the list. You know, because like think of how many other people were trying that and they weren't.
Well, and I think there might just be I mean, I guess it doesn't necessarily track because Joni Mitchell's 3, but there's kind of a Laurel Canyon bias maybe because the last removal stuck in my craw, I'm a big Zappa guy, and he and the Mothers only had 2 albums on there. We're only in it for the money and Freak Out, and they both got bumped. So Uncle Frank and the Mothers are not on the list anymore.
And that I think people forget how weird and influential Frank Zappa was back in the day. Because, I mean, look at the way the world has gone since. You know what I mean? So it's like he would have been perfectly normal in this day and age. You know, like look at the guys that have become famous since him, like Wayne Coyne with Flaming Lips. Like being that weird mercurial lead singer guy is like the thing now. You know, and he helped kind of make that blueprint. You know, because before him, you know, to be like a mercurial, interesting lead singer, you had to be like a Jerry Lee Lewis, like weirdo and just this big bombastic person. You know, he was like a general of music. You know, he was like, this is the music we're going to make. This is how we're going to do it. And it's like, he was such a unique person in that at that time that I think because there's more people like him nowadays that people forget how influential that was.
Well, and he's really, honestly, more of a composer and a band leader more than anything because in a lot of instances, other people sang the songs, especially on, like, Joe's Garage. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a pleasant voice. He knew that. He was more interested in instrumentation and arrangement and also production. I mean, he was instrumental in getting the Moog synthesizer into the mainstream. He loved that fucking thing. Yeah. So, like, he was an incredibly influential guy in terms of he was extremely prolific in his output. He was influential in production and, again, experimentation. How pleasant is all of it to listen to? I mean, Weasels Rip My Flash is some weird shit. Wawa Jawaka is fucking weird shit. But something like Joe's Garage is a rock opera. You can listen to it start to finish and get something out of it. Early Mothers, same thing. So he did have his like weirdo, wacko, experimental stuff, but it's not all Yoko Ono bullshit, dolphin noise, primal scream therapy. Like he dabbled. So maybe it's not the most popular, enjoyable thing, but Freak Out came out in the same year as Revolver and Astral Weeks and Pet Sounds. It was part of that new vanguard of music that grabs you by the fucking balls and doesn't let go. So to not even leave Freak Out on there, even low on the list, I think sucks, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think there was a lot of that. I mean, I think it was just that they kind of treat, and I think they did this in 2003 as well. They kind of treat the back end of the list as like, we're just going to throw on the personal favorites of the folks that are putting this list together. And I think that a lot of albums fell victim to that on this one as well. Because like Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell was one of the best selling albums of all time. And, you know, with subject matter that is still relevant today. I mean, obviously, you know, people don't go really park by the lake anymore. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Well, they should.
Yeah. But it's just like that sort of thing to me didn't make much sense, leaving him off of there. And then, you know, to have some of the albums on there that they do and leave off the Killers and leave off Sturgill Simpson, it just didn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't make any sense. And it's not to take anything away from the people who did get added, because 162 albums left the list and were obviously replaced by 162 new albums by 102 new artists. So 48 artists got bumped, so 102 could come in and fill in the gaps, and there were doubles, like Taylor Swift had 3 albums, Frank Ocean had 2, and so on and so on. Beyonce had 2, I think. Lemonade and I don't know what the other one was off the top of my head. But like worthy people got added in. It's not a knock on them. But a lot of people I've never fucking heard of also got on there. Mm-hmm. Like, let's try to find some of those. What the fuck?
I'm just going to go right to the 500 down to 451, and we can start right there. So like I was saying, was it Arcade Fire, Funeral? I mean, shit, like is Arcade Fire, when's the last time they released anything relevant? And the thing is, like, even when that album came out, nobody had heard of them. So like, how does that bump anything from the list? Is like, that's the question I asked a lot. You know, how does that bump anything from the list? Let's see, the various artists, the Indestructible Beat of Soweto at 497. Now this one is, they said, influenced Paul Simon's Graceland. Like, it was a huge influence on that. But again, like, why, like, if that's your reasoning, if the reasoning basically is that it influenced another album, like, why the criteria for that specific one and not other ones? Like, why, you know, it's just such a weird way that they put the list together, that it's like, it's just very subjective, every single pick that they do.
Yeah. Why does one album that inspired one other album, just put on the album it inspired? If you like Graceland, just put fucking Graceland on there. Is it even on there? It must be.
Yeah. I think Graceland is in the top 100. I mean, that was a pretty seminal album. Yeah.
So then, I mean, just do that. Why do you have to do? Oh, it's the one that inspired it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
You know, someone's added, like, Harry Styles' Fine Line, added at 491, like, absolutely deserves to be there. Because, I mean, that's, like, of the new school, like, he's probably one of the biggest pop stars, at least of the, you know, on the male side, might be the biggest one in the world right now.
And all the Kanye that got added and moved around, like, he's a fucking dickhead, but the music deserves the spot. Mm-hmm. In terms of the quality of the music and the cultural relevance, Taylor Swift deserves it for the cultural relevance. I would say not for the content, but other people would disagree. So I get where their heads are at with some things, and then I guess it's just the nature of the voting. Like, if 300 people vote and 2 people say Arcade Fire, that's enough to get it 500. If no one says Meatloaf, you're fucked.
But how does that, see, that's the thing that I don't, like, how does if 2 people are going to say Arcade Fire, how does nobody say Meatloaf?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. Unless you strictly asked 17-year-olds to do this list.
Yeah, that could be, I guess.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, Miranda Lambert is on here at 480, and we don't have a single album by Sturgill Simpson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Christ, what the fuck?
Yeah. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
You want to know what the 2 biggest net shifts were?
Yes.
On the whole wide list? Muddy Waters with the album The Anthology, he went from 38 to 483 for a net shift of 445.
Whew.
Big drop for Muddy Waters, which again, if we're talking about the changing of the guard, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the biggest net shift in a positive direction with a net gain of 453 From the 481 spot to 28, D'Angelo with Voodoo.
Mm-hmm. I think we talked about, I forget what album we were talking about when I mentioned that D'Angelo Voodoo album.
It's a great album. Again, I might have done Brown Sugar instead, but I understand the argument for Voodoo.
Yeah, I mean, Brown Sugar, I think, was still in the top 50, I want to say. I mean, it was still up there, too. Like, he had two albums in the top 100, I'm pretty sure. But that's it. The fact that one was ranked so low to start with is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was only, 2 years old when they came out with the original list. It had come out in 2001, I think.
2000 or 2001, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but just for that music video for, what's it called, Untitled, just for that alone, I mean, that song was unbelievable.
I love the song Devil's Pie. They used it in Belly, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, what a great movie. Speaking of DMX.
Yeah. Right?
Speaking of DMX.
There you go.
Oh, man. Yeah. And the fact that also, I just thought of it, no DMX albums on here.
Jeff, to whom do you pen an angry letter?
Let me tell you a little something about DMX, my friends, my loyal listeners. He came out with his first 5 albums debuted at number 1. His 6th missed it by 1,500 copies or something like that. So 5 albums in a row debuted at not just on the hip hop charts, on the Billboard 200, number 1 overall, debuted 5 in a row. Only the Beatles had ever done that before him. Since I think Drake has done it, in more new artists, but because of the digital age, they're able to, do that a lot more. And the way, there's a lot of trickery with album sales these days and what counts as one and what doesn't. Yeah, a lot of asterisks. Let me tell you, there aren't any on DMX, my friends. There aren't any on him. And the fact that he didn't get any respect or any love on this list is wild to me. I mean, honestly, not just personal opinion, but Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, and It's Dark and Hell is Hot are 2 of the best hip-hop albums of all time. Of all time.
When you put it that way in terms of the number of units that it moved, that is strange that did not merit any consideration. Maybe it's a case of who he is and I don't know much about him, but who he is as a person. I don't know if
they put Marvin Gaye number 1. He had his severe problems. I mean, he was
and John Lennon, the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, how
Michael
many Beatles albums do they have on here? I mean, it's just they can't unless it was really terrible, but it's DMX I don't think has really done anything any worse than anybody else that's on this list.
Well, the big complaint I've seen lobbed at DMX too is that he's not creative with his verses and his rapping. It's an over-reliance on fuck and the N-word to fill space. Yeah, well,
if you listen to more of the albums, you would understand that's not the case. But it's he definitely, there's so many on, especially on, and then there was X, the album that had Party Up in Here, as well as What's My Name, What These Bitches Want, the one he did with Cisco. I mean, he is very, very clever in some of the songs that he puts together. And he did the verses with Snoop Dogg not too long ago. And if people aren't familiar with that, definitely keep your eyes on those because they're really cool. They take 2 artists and they just play their biggest hits kind of against each other. But a lot of times what it turns into is generally 2 contemporaries, 2 peers in the same genre of music. And they generally just start doing the other songs along with them. So when Snoop Dogg and DMX were doing these songs, Snoop Dogg knew every word to every DMX song that was played. And DMX was really hammered. So he was trying to rap the Snoop verses along with him, but he couldn't do it because he was pretty fucked up. Mm-hmm. But the fact that somebody of Snoop Dogg's stature, knew every single one of DMX's songs, and clearly because he loves them, that tells me that maybe DMX deserves a little more love when you're talking about, some of the best rappers of all time.
Well, you've made a compelling argument for it to the point that I think maybe not necessarily next week or whatever, because we haven't decided when we're going to drop this episode either, but I think it merits future consideration. You can log a DMX pick, and I'm not anti-DMX. It's just a blind spot for me. I haven't heard enough. I haven't absorbed enough DMX to really form an opinion one way or another. So it's not the same as me making you listen to Elvis Costello, but maybe we do that. You pick a good DMX, I pick a good Elvis Costello, and we kind of do a cross-cultural exchange.
Yeah, we could do that. And I mean, I'm, certainly I feel like I was getting myself all riled up here, ready to attack about DMX. And let me tell you, my friends, if you are going to utter a bad word about DMX, I will come after you.
You know who you guys fucking answer to in that case.
Yeah, you know who's coming for you. But yeah, I mean, as far as in that's one I didn't even think of. Like, how did DMX not make it on here whatsoever? I mean, that's another crazy one to me. Yeah, I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add to the discussion here.
Not especially, and we're at about an hour, so I think that's probably as good a place to stop as any.
Yeah, that's perfect. So folks out there, let us know. If you go through the list, tell us what you think got snubbed, what you think should have been on there. Tell me if you don't like DMX, so I know to beat you up a little bit next time we record. Just let us know what you were thinking. And, because we'd like to, certainly if you have some compelling arguments, we can certainly bring those up on a future pod. I think these kind of discussions are always good because you get a sense of where people stand with what they value in music. That's why I kind of like these lists. And as long as you objectively observe them that way and understand that they're put together with, there's always some sort of inherent bias, then these things can serve a lot of value.
And it's definitely, if you choose to participate with us, it's fun to see where your tastes lie. It's interesting for us in terms of future programming. That's just, and the other thing is, if you utilize the Gmail, which goddamn Rory on our sister podcast, the Skimbo Lounge, goes, nobody uses Gmail. Why do we even pump the Gmail? Well, guess what, Rory? An Instagram DM with a long-winded message in it doesn't hit the same as a well-worded fucking email that starts with, hope this finds you well.
Yes.
I will read that on the air. We will read your email on the air if you send us one. So if you want to send a whole thing about, like, this is why I think DMX sucks. This is why I think Elvis Costello sucks. This is why I think fucking Hit Me Baby One More Time should have been the number one album. If you have a well-reasoned argument and you email it to us, we'll fucking read it on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid of the email. It's your
uncensored. Friend. Uncensored.
You're goddamn right.
All the F-bombs you want to drop in there, just do it.
If you want to write it as a haiku or a rap, we'll perform it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some words we won't say. I'm not going to drop the N-bomb. I'll turn that one over to a gentleman or guys or something like that. If there's particular lyrics you want to put some shine to, but other than that, it's all fair game, baby.
Yeah. So What are you waiting for? Why are you guys afraid? Don't be shy. Step right up.
And again, keep those album submissions coming in. I know this wasn't a typical episode like we normally do, but we'd like to keep doing more things like this that get into a little, more specific territory. And, we really have appreciated the participation that we've had so far. And it makes it fun to do these things. So we really, we want to know what you think about the list. We want to hear what maybe your number one album of all time is, and if it's a good one, we can say, yeah, you're right. That should have been number one. And, just let us know. Again, hit us on the Instagram DMs out on that line, Twitter DMs even out on that line 1. The Gmail, as Alex was mentioning, out on that line at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this special edition, do you have anything else you want to add, or should we fucking blow this popsicle stand?
I think we got to blow this popsicle stand, man. I think we made all the points we needed to make.
All right. Well, until next time, thanks for tuning in. This has been Out on That Line. We'll see you soon.